What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Kanto Collective. Today we have something a little bit different in store. We are going to be making a tier list of the original 151 Ken Sugimori artworks. So I've thought about doing this from a competitive standpoint, from a playthrough standpoint, and I've decided that it would be best and more fitting for this channel if we focus on the artwork itself, going back to the original Ken Sugimori depiction of each Pokemon. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. For me personally, I think the grass starters are some of his best work. I think I'm going to just line them up straight to the top. I think that's probably the best Ivysaur artwork we've gotten in 30 years. And the CD promo Venusaur, probably one of my top chases of all time. So those have to go in that kind of elite tier for me. Now when it goes to Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard, you're going to see me drop a little bit here. I think Charmander has better artworks to date. Charmeleon does as well. But being such a fan of the CD promos, I do think that Charizard has to go in Hall of Fame. There's one or two that I would say probably could beat it out, but from my opinion, it's one of the best Charizard artworks we've ever gotten as well. Now for Squirtle, this is kind of the cuter depiction of Squirtle. I'm more of a fan of the Squirtle squad, but I think the War Turtle is phenomenal here. I think similarly to the Ivysaur, it's one of the best depictions we've gotten of it. And then, I'm going to follow up, get the 3 CD promo starters up there. But, we're not ranking any of them too low. So, we're going to kind of explain the ranking system as we go through. Caterpie, I love this Caterpie artwork. And I believe it's what's featured on the vending series. So, I will probably put it in that Team Rocket grunt. So the way I'm ranking this Hall of Fame is, you need to see that sprite or that artwork whenever you beat the game on your Hall of Fame list. Elite Four is kind of the next tier down there. And then you have your gym leader, Rival Gary, Team Rocket Grunt, which, we always beat, but every now and then they have some good stuff. Bill's PC would be something you're just going to kind of store away. And the tall grass is, maybe it's not even worth catching. So, I do think we're going to rank Caterpie well above Metapod here. And then Butterfree, this is one of my favorite Butterfree arts. And, ever since growing up watching the show Bye Bye Butterfree episode, I've really been a fan of Butterfree. So, just personally, that's going to make it up to my Elite Four tier. I'm sure many other people would knock that down a little bit, but for me, I just really enjoy that artwork. Weedle, I think it's cool. I will probably put it down in the PC along with Kakuna. I think both of those beat out Metapod, even though it might be the best Metapod we've gotten. It doesn't do anything for me personally. I think that Caterpie is just a lot cooler. And then I'm going to put Beedrill in the Rival Gary tier. I know it's a little surprising to have it over 2 of the starters, but just a super sick artwork. Kind of in that attack stance. And speaking of the attack stance, we got Pidgey. Really the whole line here for Pidgey is really well done. Pidgeotto, I don't think I can push it into Elite. And believe it or not, I think I'm ranking Pidgeot below the first 2 evolutions. There's just something about being in action, flying towards something that gives the artwork a little bit more life. But yeah, I would love to hear if you guys would agree on that ranking there. Now for me, I kind of have a soft spot for Rattata and Raticate. You know, they're often overlooked in the game, but Raticate with Hyper Fang can do a lot. Now keep in mind this is solely on artwork, not on effectiveness in game. So we will bump him down to Bill's PC. But I think I'm keeping Raticate in Rival Gary. You know, that's a tough decision there. You know, I don't think I can justify putting it over the two starters, but it is a phenomenal artwork there. Now, Spearow, as much as I love it, I think there's a lot better Spearow artworks out there that we've gotten in the past 30 years. However, the Spearow is one of my favorite artworks. So that's going to be jumped up to Gym Leader, but we're keeping Spearow down in the PC. For me, you know, we got to keep Ekans in the tall grass. Hardly catch it in game, and, you know, the artwork is just a snake. It's really hard to make a snake look cool. I think with the shading they implemented here, they did their best, but relative to the rest of the artwork that we got, I think you gotta drop it down to tall grass. And Arbok's a tough one for me because solely the creativity in it alone has got to put it in that Team Rocket grunt. Almost in that Rival Gary. But I don't know, the art itself doesn't hold as much weight as some of these other artworks. And now Pikachu here is an interesting one because Sugimori has maybe 15 different original Pikachus. So we are solely ranking this one. And I think we're probably leaving it in the PC. The Pikachu with the shocks coming out of the cheeks, I would rank a lot higher. But for now, we're going to leave just this version of Pikachu down in Bill's PC. Raichu, kind of similar. There's other Raichus that I like more than this one. It does kind of have that action feel to it, but it's still leaving something to be desired. Now, Sandshrew and Sandslash. You know, I'm probably ranking Sandslash a little bit lower than I should, but I just know how much heat is on this list. So I'm trying to keep it relative to everything else we're going to be seeing. I can't push it too high up. Otherwise, I would probably put Raticate a little bit higher. Now for me, these kind of go hand in hand. Nidoran, male and female. I think Nidoran male is a amazing artwork here. Nidoran female to me kind of has that more rat feel, whereas Nidoran male, you have that sharp side profile with the horn on the top of the head. You know, that faint red eye looking upwards. I think they did really well on that. And I kind of feel the same way following the whole evolution line there. Nidoqueen for me, just something about it, it's missing a little bit of character compared to Nidoking. Nidorino, I gotta put up there in that Rival Gary tier. And for me personally, I'm putting Nidoking in Hall of Fame. I know that's a take a lot of people probably won't agree with, but there are some Sugimori Nidokings that are just some of the most beautiful artworks we've seen on TCG cards. So I think I gotta put him up there. So then that brings us to a little run of kind of the cuter Pokemon. So we're gonna have Clefairy and Clefable. You know, both of these, this might be a heated debate here, but neither one of them really does anything for me. Yeah, and that's really all I can say there. And, you know, Jigglypuff is a little bit more iconic to me, but Wigglytuff, I've never had much of a connection to, and that artwork is just lacking compared to Jigglypuff. You know, Jigglypuff is almost mid-singing. eyes kind of look like it's mesmerized by something it's looking at. Whereas Wigglytuff is kind of out of it, maybe? I don't know the best way to describe that, but just kind of the vibe that I'm getting from it. You know, Vulpix and Ninetales are two that I never use in game, but I love the artworks here. So we are going to throw them up higher on the list. And now a lot of the times I will have the final evolution above the first or second evolution line. You know, this one's tough. I think we'll leave it there for now. The colorway on this Vulpix is just really well done. That's what's kind of making me debate. But let's go Zubat. You know, sorry, buddy, you're going to be at the bottom. Golbat. Really well done, Golbat, but there are better artworks out there, so we're going to have to keep it down in the PC tier. All right, now we're getting filled out a little bit. You know, I'm sure there's already some takes on here that you guys are going to debate. But Oddish with the little Bieber swoosh, you know, doesn't do much for me there. Gloom, I think that's a really good Gloom art. You know, it's got a lot of character for kind of how neutral the color is. We're going to leave it at Team Rocket Grunt because I don't think it would beat out the Nidoran Male or a Vulpix or Beedrill. But I think it's right up there with Arbok, Raticate. And you know, Vileplume I would actually put below it. I'm tempted to even put that in Tall Grass. Yeah, let's go ahead and drop Vileplume down. And now we're coming up on a good little run here that if we were doing effectiveness, most of these here would be towards the bottom of our tier list. Sadly, with artwork, Paris is still going to be at the bottom for me. But Parasect is an artwork I really enjoy. You know, a lot of focus on that evolution from Paris with the angle that's being chosen here. Just a super nice interpretation. Now we go to Venonat. Venonat's really well done. You know, the shading alone. But as you can see, I kind of like that little bit of action or emotion. And I think Venonat captures that really well. Venomoth, for me, I would put it a little bit lower. Probably in the PC tier. I don't think it's nearly as good as Gloom. Sandslash, you know, I don't think it could be grouped up there. But it's definitely not in the bottom tier. So now, Diglett. You know, it's a kind of a hilarious little portrait of Diglett there. And I think I actually like it more than Dugtrio. It has a little bit more emotion despite the eyebrows giving that sense of anger on the Dugtrio. You know, that just like mystical wonder on the Diglett's face is really drawing you in. So, you know, as we fill this out, we'll have to scroll back and forth a little bit, so I'll try to do that as smoothly as possible. But let's see, we have a Meowth, the classic Meowth artwork. That's probably gonna go Gym Leader. I don't think I'm gonna put it up in that elite tier. There's some more coming that I know are gonna be in that elite tier for me. So we're gonna leave it down a peg just for now. And I think it beats out Persian's art by a mile here. You know, Team Rocket's Persian, just kind of the overall vibe. You get that feel from it so early on that I'm gonna keep it in the PC, but that artwork for me personally just, it doesn't do too much for me. Now, Psyduck, on the other hand, that is a spectacular artwork. You know, by now, I love the emotion that you can see on the faces of the Pokemon. I think Sugimori really captured Psyduck really well, and just somehow the vision for what the Pokemon was going to be and how it would act was so well incorporated into the first drawing. that I think we have to put it in that elite tier. And as much as I love like the Fearow art, the Bulbasaur, I think it is a step above. Now the Golduck, it's a nice Golduck, but it's fairly basic. It's got a little bit of movement in the drawing, but I don't think it beats out a lot of these that are higher up. Now Mankey, if you've seen my playthrough, Mankey is one of my favorites. But I think this artwork for Mankey is not even close to the best artwork we've gotten. So I am going to be throwing it in tall grass. Primeape, it kind of kills me to put this so low, but just looking at the rest of this list, what we have ranked already, I don't think I can justify putting it any higher. But speaking of putting something higher, the Arcanine and Growlithe are both phenomenal artworks. I'm tempted to... Yeah, I think we're going to push Growlithe up to Hall of Fame. Personally, I like this Growlithe artwork more than the Arcanine. And, it's just that direct eye contact using Roar. It's got a lot of character. The stripes and the colors are so well done. And I know the same could be said on Arcanine here, but that's really just a super iconic Growlithe. So now we're going to hop on down, and we have some interesting options coming up. Poliwag, it's going to be bottom for me. Poliwhirl. Poliwhirl, I think I will put up there with Golduck. It's got that real emphasis on the hypnosis while still maintaining that kind of like tadpole frog feel to it. And then Poliwrath, I think I can't put it any higher than Primeape. It is a cool artwork. It does have that emotion and that action that I've been talking about, but something about it just isn't there for me. I think the Poliwhirl is much better, personally. Now we go into Abra. The Sleeping Abra is just so iconic. It's got to go up in that rival Gary tier. Kadabra. One of the best Kadabra artworks I think we've ever gotten. And Alakazam. I think I put Abra and Kadabra above Alakazam here. It is a very nice artwork. Don't get me wrong. But compared to what we've gotten on Alakazam up to date, I don't know how well it holds up, and compared to some of these other artworks, it just doesn't have the same life. You gotta think these are the earliest depictions. Some of these may be a little bit later, but these were really what shaped the Pokemon's life and how they acted, what their traits were, so we want a little bit more in that category there. Now Machop, solely for the colorway and the shading, it's got to go in Team Rocket Grunt. Machoke and Machamp. I think Machoke, personally, for me, is the coolest of the evolution line here. Just kind of that straight stare flexing at you. Almost has that championship belt on the waist, like that's a really cool touch that was added so early on. Now Bellsprout, sadly it's just a vine or a weed, more likely. Weepinbell, I think, Weepinbell is iconic. That artwork's not the most iconic. I think you guys, if you follow along with the trading card game, you probably know the most iconic Weepinbell. And then the Victory Bell I don't think is too much better, but I wouldn't say it's worse. It highlights a different aspect of the character, kind of a different emotion, but I don't think it really can be bumped up into that next tier. Now, for me, Tentacool, it's. I don't know the reference here, but it reminds me of an anime character to a degree. For that, and it just has this like evil villain feel to it. So I'm gonna throw it in Bill's PC, and then we're gonna come up and put Tentacruel in that Elite Four. It is a very strong artwork, beautiful use of coloring, the slim eyes, and the tentacles spread out, kind of engulfing you. Something about that makes that artwork really powerful. Geodude, Graveler, Golem. I hate this because if I was ranking on playthrough viability or power, they would be at the bottom, and they're still at the bottom. Golem, so much more could be done there. And I think better things have been done with Golem since it's been created, but the original artworks they didn't quite do enough for me personally, and I think it's kind of an overlooked Pokemon in general. I know in modern TCG you get a Golem EX in almost every set now, but normally the cards people are tossing away, so we would like to see kind of a revamp of that whole line. I think Geodude has a firm foundation. I don't think it needs to be adjusted, but Graveler and Golem could benefit from kind of a redesign. Alright, and Ponyta and Rapidash. These are two that are extremely strong. They're just horses with flames on them. But the detail where the flames are coming off, the coloration of the flame, really well done. And I think I got to keep those kind of towards the top of the list. It hurts me having Beedrill down that far. I think we're going to bump up Beedrill a little bit. That just feels right. Because that's maybe the best Beedrill we've gotten. Alright, Slowpoke. Great artwork. I know it's not the best image of it there, but we're going to put that up in Rival Gary. It's close to getting in that gym leader tier. Slowbro, I think it's good. The incorporation of the shell into the evolution line. The story behind it, very cool, but the artwork itself I don't think is better than Slowpoke. And now we have Magnemite, which doesn't do anything special. Looking at this, I'm not actually sure that's the first Ken Sugimori artwork of it. I'd have to fact check that, but that one specifically, it's going to be towards the bottom of our list here. But the Magneton is one that I really enjoy. It's so simple, yet it does have a lot of character to it. Farfetch'd. That's a killer artwork. With the leak in its mouth. Wing up in the air. I don't think I can push it up into Elite Four, but it is definitely in that conversation. Doduo, love it. Love the Pokemon itself. The artwork, just not great. It's 3 little balls of fuzz with some legs and 2 necks, Now Dotrio, on the other hand, really well done. Added all those details that gave it a little bit more life, gave it more personality. I think we're still going to keep it in the Rocket Grunt. I don't think it's going to move up into our rival category. Now Seal, that's just a very fun artwork. That's really all you can say. It's just enjoyable to look at. I think for that, we're going to bump it up a little bit. Dugong, it's a really unique and cool take, but there's just, it doesn't do enough for me to put it any higher, especially not above Seal. Grimer, just a hilarious artwork. I'm going to put that in Gym Leader. I know a lot of people wouldn't put it that high, but growing up on SpongeBob and Patrick, that face alone just reminds me of so many good Patrick moments. And it's got to be up in the top 3 tiers for me. Now Muck, it's just kind of a blob. I like that they tried to give the body some definition, putting some action in there, but just not quite enough there for me. Now we come down to Shelder and Cloyster. I think the Shelder art is really well done. The Cloyster art as well. I think we're going to drop the Cloyster art, because I do think I like the Shelder art a little bit more. It's got a little bit more intrigue to it. But man, the Cloyster is cool too. That's the hard part, trying to rank the Ken Sugimori artwork. Even in the tall grass tier, it is phenomenal artwork. I'm not dishing out any hate on anything I put low at the list. I still really enjoy some of these, but just in the grand scheme of what we have up here, he was really on one when he was coming up with this. So coming down to the Gengar evolution line, Ghastly, I think the colorization of the cloud, I think that's really well done. I think Haunter has got to go in that rival tier. And then, I love this Gengar art. I am a little biased. I love Gengar. We keep one over here just on the desk at all times. But it's got to go in that Hall of Fame tier. I thought about limiting that to 6 Pokemon, and if we did, I would consider dropping it. But it's just a super cool artwork. Onyx, I love it. But I don't think it's the coolest Onyx we've gotten. And I know some of these, from memory, some of these feel like they may not be the first Sugimori artwork. So if they're not, I apologize, but we are just ranking solely on what's on the list. If there is a Sugimori artwork that came before one of these, and maybe it is much better, I apologize. But we are just ranking what's here on the list. And Drowsy might be in my Elite 4. I love the artwork. I was doing a deep dive on Drowsy the other day, so it's actually modeled after a mythical animal in Japan. I would pronounce it, but I would butcher it. So if you want to know a little bit more, just give that a Google. But really cool background, and you can look at the mythical animal and tie some characteristics, and you really get to see what inspired Drowsy. I know that nose is just goofy, but he smells and eats your dreams. So Drowsy's an interesting one to do a deep dive on if you ever have the time. Hypno, very well done. I think it's kind of in there with Alakazam for me. I don't think I rank it above any of these really, but I think we gotta put it in that grunt tier at least. It deserves a little bit better than the PC. Alright, Krabby. The early Krabby drawings make it look so much more intimidating than what you picture when you hear Krabby. For that alone, I'm gonna keep it in the PC and not down in the tall grass. Kingler, I like Krabby's artwork more here. And seeing as I'm not pushing Krabby up the list, I think we gotta drop Kingler all the way down to the bottom. Alright, coming to Voltorb and Electrode. Polar opposites here. Such a simple design. Kind of a direct take off of the Pokeball. But again, I can't push them too far up the list. And this is another case where I think the first evolution is better than the final. Execute, not great. Executor is one of my favorite Sugimori artworks. You know, I said that with Firo as well, and put it in Gym Leader, because what we have up here is just much better. But solely for me, I do love these two. Just in the grand scheme of things, I don't think I can justify putting them any higher, looking at all the rest. Cubone, just a phenomenal artwork. That's going to jump up there. And another case where I think it's much better than the evolution. I think we're going to put that... We'll put it in Team Rocket. I think it beats out a couple of these. Alright, coming down to Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. You know, Hitmonchan, I think as Pokemon got a little bit more prevalent, Hitmonchan's one of those Pokemon that's identity kind of evolved with Pokemon. I think we're just lacking a little bit of intensity here, even with the boxing glove and the stance. You know, you don't get a feel for how powerful or how strong Hitmonchan is. And with that kind of tribute to Jackie Chan, I want a little bit more out of that. Now, Hitmonlee, I think it's very well done. You know, kind of that, just the angle that leg kick is coming up at. Really well done. The hands stretched out. The eyes are really cool. You know, I think we bumped that up to rival Gary. I don't think it's quite in this tier, but it is a very well done artwork. As all of these are, but comparative to each other. Alright. Lickitung. Gotta go bottom for me. You know, I need to do a deep dive on what the inspiration behind Lickitung was. But it's a Pokemon that, you know, I would guarantee most casual fans don't even realize exist. You know, so that artwork just, it doesn't stick with you at all. You could see that artwork for the first time 10 times, you know, so for that I gotta put it in tall grass. And now we have coughing and wheezing. You know, this is going to be another case where I think coughing is a little bit cooler than wheezing. I think that artwork's really well done. You know, don't get me wrong, wheezing is good as well, but I think we're going to drop it all the way to the PC tier. That's a tough one to do. But I mean, like Seal, Onyx, Hypno, all of those I think are better artworks. But coughing is done really well. Now, growing up, one of my favorite Pokemon was Rhyhorn. Something about it, just the artwork itself, really made me enjoy it. So for a little bit of personal bias on the list, I'm going to put Rhyhorn up in Elite Four. I know not a lot of people would probably put it that high, but for me personally, having the kind of connection I did with it as a kid, I gotta rank it that high. And I gotta put Rhydon in Hall of Fame. You know, there's maybe a hot take, but Rhydon was the first Pokemon ever drawn, ever illustrated. So I think solely for that fact, you have to have it up in the top 2 or 3 tiers. And then with, you know, my bias coming along here as well, I got to put it up in Hall of Fame. because at the end of the day, it kind of led to more inspiration of everything else we've seen on this list. Now we have Chansey. You know, Chansey is an interesting one. I love using it in game, but I think it's going to be in the bottom tier here. Tangela, kind of a cool little artwork there. You know, I've said this before. Is it a grass type? Is it a water type? Kind of looks like it's swimming through the ocean in this picture. So, you never know, but really well done. When I see this, I see kind of the submarine lights coming through the face. But it is a grass type. Kangaskhan. Again, one of my favorite artworks. We're probably going to be putting that in Elite Four. You know, that connection, mother son here. Really cool, really well done. Horsey, you know, Horsey, nothing special. But I think Kingdra is one artwork that was done really well. You know, it's got this fierceness. It's got this, I don't know how to describe it precisely, but just a really well done artwork. As I said earlier with Lickitung, like you could see Lickitung for the first time 10 times. With this Kingdra artwork, that's one you're gonna remember. Goldeen, Seaking. You know, that I don't know if there is a tier list they make it out of the bottom rank, which is sad to say. But for me, that's where they're gonna sit. Kind of the koi fish. I love that inspiration, but yeah, it doesn't do it for me. So now Star U, Star Me, and Star U. You know, this is one I love, and I love some later illustrations of. But I don't know that I would rank these specific illustrations too much higher than where they're at. I think there is better out there. Mr. Mime. You know, just a great artwork. What else can you say? Very creative, yet very simple. Scyther. I think you already know we're bumping this one up the list. You know, I think it deserves to be in that second tier. And now we are about 40 minutes into this, so we're going to try to speed up a little bit. Jinx, you know, as ridiculous as it is, I think Jinx was really well done. I think the character, you can tell, was kind of fleshed out early on. And the emotion and kind of personality comes out really well in this illustration. I don't think it beats out some of these up here in the gym leader tier, but we will definitely put it up in the rival Gary tier. Now, Electabuzz and Magmar, they're two that I love, and most people don't use them in game, so a lot of people probably don't have that deep of a connection with them. You know, I think Electabuzz is easily Elite Four. I think it could be argued Hall of Fame. Magmar, I'm going to drop it down to rival Gary, but I don't know if I can say it's not cooler than Ponyta. So, you know, we're going to bump it up. Looking at what else is in this tier, I think you got to bump that up there. And now at the end, we'll do a quick run through, highlighting everything in each tier and making any final adjustments. Pinsir, you know, not one I really enjoy, but I think the artwork is dope. You know, the horns on the pincers, the mouth with the big teeth. You know, I think that's really well done. Tauros, sorry buddy, but you're just a buffalo with 3 tails. Magikarp. See, now this is how you do the interpretation of straight fish, and you do it well. Gyarados. One of the best Gyarados artworks. I'm going to bump that up to Hall of Fame. Might be wild to say. Now we're getting to where we have to scroll a lot here, and a lot of these are going to be in the higher tiers. Lapras, I'm probably leaving in Grunt tier, though. A lot of people love Lapras. You know, I do really enjoy Lapras as a Pokemon, but I think there are better artworks. Kind of the same here with Ditto. I love Ditto. I believe this is actually Koga's Ditto and not the original drawing here, but correct me if I'm wrong. And that one it's nice, but I think it's lower down for me. And Ditto's one of my favorite Pokemon, so, you know, knowing how many cool Ditto artworks there are, that's got to drop down a little bit. You know, Eevee, it's never really done much for me. The whole point of Eevee is to evolve. And now our evolutions, you know, if you know me, we're going to put Vaporeon a little bit higher than we're going to put Jolteon and Flareon. I think they're both really well done. Vaporeon's just a little bit more elegant. Has a little bit more of a unique flair to it. Kind of the ribbed back with the almost like dolphin tail. You know, just a really cool evolution line that they came up with there. Porygon, that's a tough one for me because I really enjoy Porygon. I love kind of the shading, the kind of reflectiveness that they were able to portray here. But I don't think I'm going to bump it any higher. Now, Omanite, Omastar. Omastar is really well done. Omanite it's good. It gives you that sense of fossil, but Omastar is really well done here. We're going to probably bump that up to Gym Leader. And that's one that feels like it's not his first artwork either. So maybe some of these aren't. I know at least this like Aerodactyl, Articuno, I know these are. Dragonite is as well. You know, Kabutops is pretty sweet though. Kabuto might have to jump up a tier at least. I mean, it's definitely cooler than Wigglytuff, but I don't know if it's on the same level as like Machop or this Raticate. I love that Raticate. Now Articuno, one of my favorite kind of with Ditto, but this artwork does leave a little bit to be desired. Kind of the same feeling on Snorlax here. It's such a classic artwork that I gotta put it a little bit higher. And this might be a hot take here, but this Articuno's going way down the list. You know, I love this Moltres, and I love the Zapdos. But the Articuno just has never hit for me. You know, Zapdos, for me, is easily Hall of Fame here. It's maybe my favorite Zapdos art ever. And that could also be said with the Moltres. Moltres for me here is also going Hall of Fame. Just a gorgeous use of kind of fully making the wings flame, the shading, the coloration, and then just the sharpness that they were able to achieve on Zapdos is really well done as well. Now, Dratini and Dragonair, you know, I don't know if these were the first artwork Sugimori did. I don't know if he was the original designer behind them. I know with the evolutions, I don't think he was actually the original designer. And then we kind of got these in his style. but these just weren't great for me. And as much as I love Dragonite, I don't know that I could rank it above Aerodactyl here or Lapras. Now, Mew. You know, Mew is very iconic, very well done. I don't think I'm ranking it over anything in this tier, though. I think I could argue everything in this tier, but I'm not taking it over Kingdra, Cubone, Grimer, Magneton, Fearow, Beedrill. You know, it's a very nice artwork, but it's not jumping into that Electabuzz, Scyther kind of tier for me. And then finally, the last of our rankings here, we are moving Mewtwo to Hall of Fame. You know, I'm a big Mewtwo collector and just love the original artwork done by Sugimori. There's a couple more done by Sugimori that are really, really cool. And then one done by, if I pronounce this correctly, Benimaru Ito. Maybe my favorite TCG card of all time. So I have a soft spot for Mewtwo art, but the early depictions especially are just really well done. So let's do a quick rundown, make some final adjustments, and then drop down in the comments what you guys would change. You know, maybe just list who your Hall of Fame would be out of the 151. I'm interested to see what you guys would say your favorites are. So, looking at the Hall of Fame, the only one I could argue is maybe I'd bump Growlithe down and Electabuzz up. Maybe Kadabra up as well. But I'm pretty happy with those top two. You know, I probably could. Personally, I could put Beedrill even higher. Cubone I could definitely put higher. That's a gorgeous artwork. You know, let's bump those two up. Not sure everybody would agree with that, but really enjoy those two artworks. You know, I know a lot of people aren't going to like Charmeleon this low down, but I think I'm going to leave it. I think I am going to move Nidoran Male up, though. And, you know, the rest of that tier I'm pretty happy with. Now, coming down here, maybe Sandslash moving up. Maybe Gloom. I'm pretty happy with where we're at. I think I will bump Gloom up, though. Sandslash 2. I think they deserve to be a tier higher than the rest in this tier. You know, Pikachu's a tough one. We're judging just this art, otherwise I'd have it a good bit higher. You know, as I said earlier, love that Diglett. Articuno, I'm sorry. And, you know, I'm pretty happy with this ranking here. Ditto, I would love to see higher. Magikarp, I could easily argue going higher, but I think it fits better in this than with that grouping up there. And then finally in the tall grass, things we don't really even bother catching. Do we agree with all of these after the fact? Looking through the list, personally, I love Mankey, but I'm still leaving him there. You know, Geodude, maybe I'm bumping up. Kingler, maybe I need to give a little bit more respect to. You know, as I said earlier, Hitmonchan just has a lot of better artworks out there. So, I mean, yeah, I think I am pretty happy with how this list turned out. If there is anything you guys would change, or if you just want to drop down your Hall of Fame list and let me know what you guys are thinking, solely based around the artwork itself, something that I think the community as a whole needs to appreciate a little bit more. You know, just drop it down. I would love to hear your all's feedback. And as always, I really appreciate you staying this long into the video. If you made it this far, go ahead and drop a like, subscribe. I really appreciate you being here. And as always, smell you later.